Minister, I think you'll agree with me that the burning of the tents of asylum seekers on Bound Street in recent weeks is probably one of the most disgusting things that we've had to witness in our recent history. Can you speak to the conversations you've had with the Garda Commissioner since those events and make a statement on the matter?
I do agree with you, Deputy Ríordáin. As I said earlier, I think the act was vile. I think it disgusted our country. It's not a reflection of who we are as a people, who our communities are, or indeed it's not a reflection of how this country overwhelmingly has responded to welcoming new people to our country, because as you know, and in fairness, as you and as most in this House have supported, so many communities across Ireland have demonstrated really great solidarity to those who come here, often fleeing horrific circumstances, including war and persecution. And of course there have been challenges in providing accommodation. We need to be honest about that to all those seeking protection here. We do need to look at the overall context, that we've seen an increase from just over 6,800 people being accommodated by the state to over 80,000 people being accommodated by the state in just 18 months' time. And I know Minister O'Gorman, his department and the entire government and civic society are really working on bringing more beds on stream in order to house those applicants appropriately. There have been a very significant number of protests on the topic of immigration recently, and there is a small minority, and let's call them for what they are, far-right actors, far-right activists, whose intentions are to create division and who are engaging in intimidation rather than legitimate protest. We have the right to protest. I'm sure you've attended many protests. I'm sure you've probably even been protested at. I've done both too, right? But there's a very clear difference between protest and crossing that line into intimidation, into endangerment, and some of the scenes that unfolded in Dublin City Council, where those seeking protection had their belongings set on fire and their personal safety threatened, crossed well beyond the line of protest into a line of absolute disgusting and vile behaviour, and clearly into the line of criminal behaviour as well. I have, of course, had a number of conversations and meetings with the Garda Commissioner, and I'm in regular contact with him. I want to thank the Gardaí, by the way, because I do believe the Gardaí are working in extraordinarily charged environments in this city and around the country. The Garda Commissioner is obviously responsible for the operational policing matters, but I do know there's an ongoing investigation into the specific incident that you raised and a number of other investigations as well. The right to protest is enshrined in the Constitution and under our law, and it is an essential part of our democracy. But we should never, ever, ever, ever allow the lines be blurred between protest and the disgusting scenes that we saw on Main Street in recent weeks.
I suppose a level of disquiet was caused when the Taoiseach seemed to remark that we didn't have enough guards in Dublin City Centre. Then I think you contradicted that statement, and the Garda Commissioner contradicted that statement. There is disquiet as well amongst the general public as to how this was allowed to happen, how a policed protest and a counter-protest was allowed to diminish into a scenario where people's homes were set on fire. We can call them tents, but these are their homes. So a tent is as relevant as a house to somebody who has nowhere else to live, and they were set on fire. And similarly, Minister, I have to say, with this blockade that was set up in Inch in County Clare, how guards didn't feel the need or see the need to remove that blockade. There seems to be almost a level of, well, I think we need to have a conversation around how these things are managed. Now, I understand it's a difficult balancing act for the guards so not to raise tensions and make things worse. But from the outside observation of this, how the situation was allowed to descend where people felt emboldened enough to set these homes on fire, and for a blockade to continue for days and days and days without any sense that the Gardaí were going to move them on.
So firstly, there's no contradiction here. I mean, the country needs more Gardaí. The government's actively recruiting more Gardaí with the Garda Commissioner. That is happening alongside, though, a scenario where the Garda Commissioner says, to use his phrase, that he has the operational integrity to police protests. There has been, in this city alone, well over now 125 protests, or so-called protests on occasion, in terms of anti-immigration. Many, the overwhelming majority of them have been able to be passed off peacefully, have been policed well. On occasions, things have happened that have been utterly reprehensible. And it is entirely right in a democracy for you and others to come in here and absolutely ask questions about the policing response. I don't take from that at all. The only thing I would say, and in fairness you've acknowledged, is that the Gardaí do get to look at the whole picture, do get to look at things in the round. The Gardaí are following intelligence, the Gardaí are monitoring on occasion where appropriate the actions of anybody who may pose a risk to our community. The Gardaí are obviously looking at how they can de-escalate situations. In that specific situation, and I'm conscious there's an ongoing investigation, my understanding is the protest was dispersed and the Gardaí had actually done a very good job, and then unfortunately somebody returned to the scene and committed a vile act, which is utterly reprehensible.
Okay, but you say if you've been involved in protests, and I've been involved in protests, and I'll be continuing to be involved in protests, but if I blocked a road, I'd be moved. Now, I know I'm talking about two different scenarios here, but there's a feeling that, the balance that's being struck is possibly imbalanced, and that we have a scenario where the guards dealt with the situation in the way they saw fit, but it still ended up with people's homes being burnt out. And the international reaction to that is, look at what's happening in Ireland. This is what the Irish are doing. The Irish are all over the world. They talk about their immigration story, and yet when it comes to people who come to their land for sanctuary, they burn them out. And then when they block a road down an inch in County Clare, they're allowed to do it. So I'm interested to know more about what the Garda Commissioner says is the right way to deal with these things, because if I blocked the road, Minister, I'm pretty sure the guards would be down quickly to move me on.
Just before the Minister comes in, I have